your fares, please.
That's all the part of
That dates me, yes. Good evening and welcome to the second part of this evening's North Area Committee, the general part after this earlier planning section. Just to make you aware that we've had two requests for film, one from Mr. Taylor and one from the City Council, and so there are two cameras this evening, which scares me a little. If you are a member of the public who does not wish to be filmed, please indicate, and when you speak we will make sure that the people aren't filmed. So that's 4. Everyone happy with those 4? Good. Quick bit of housekeeping. In the unlikely event of a fire alarm going off, we're not expecting a drill. I'm sure we've all will be having fire exits are there, or you can go out that way. Just don't. Oh, there's one behind us which I haven't spotted. I have failed my observation test. Secondly, there are refreshments out there. There's also an exhibition about our sport policy consultation, so please do have a look at that. Oh, it's gone. There was. I hope you saw it on the way in and enjoyed it. Very useful. Good, so without further ado, we'll go on to apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Abbott and Councillor Scott, and it looks like Councillor Sales is either late or we don't know.
Apologies.
His apologies. Okay, thank you very much. There's Sales, Scott and Abbott. So then we come on to part 2, welcome and introduction. Well, I started the introduction. So that can move us on to declaration of interest. Do any members of the committee have any items of interest to declare? Councillor O'Reilly.
Yes, the item on the consultation on Victoria Road 20 miles an hour zone. My interest is I live on Victoria Road.
Thank you. Any other items of any other declarations of interest? Yeah, I would remind, there was a Freudian slip there. I would remind the committee that if they think of an item or a declaration of interest at any point during the meeting, they can declare it at any time. Chair's announcements. I would just like, at this point, to make a couple of points about we have upcoming elections, and as a result, 3 members of this committee will be standing down. Councillors Boyce, Kerr and Greeley have chosen not to stand for re-election, and I'd just like to thank them for the good hard work they put in during their terms of office. And I would also like to remind candidates, including any candidates actually on the table, this is not a party political broadcast, and trying to stick to the point. Thank you. He was, yes, shut up, Tim. Right. So we move on to, you said we did, you want to know. And the first thing is the minutes. I have 2 sets of minutes which are on pages 5 to 34 of your agendas, it says here. And after last time's controversy, are there any does anyone want to change them? No, good. So can I sign both of them? The 6th of February meeting as a true and accurate record? Yes, good. I have signed it. And the 20th of March meeting as a true and accurate record? Thank you very much. So we move on to the action sheet update, which is on page 31 of your agenda. So I'll just run through those. The Alistair Wilson item, I'm afraid there have been no further updates. There have been some effort into placing a further update. This effort will continue. Councillor Onasani, have you got anything to add to the next item? No? Yeah. So we'll leave that on there, it's still an ongoing. Yeah. The next item, 49, NAC enforcement and vehicle penalties. Anything to add to that? Comments from Philip Hammer? Or about Philip Hammer? No? Okay. CCTV in Green End Road, we've got a response this this time from me, oops, from last time. Speed awareness courses, Tim, is there anything to add to that?
Well, the police will be here later, but the latest update I had a week or so ago is that it's people are still thinking about working on it.
So I think we should leave that one as an ongoing item. Yeah. Tree roots, Councillor Manning, anything to add?
Ongoing, but we had another tree to the list, so.
Ongoing on that one as well. And I think the 20-mile-an-hour one, we won't discuss that, is a whole agenda item on it, unless you've got anything really urgent to add on it. No, so that one's can go. Okay. Thank you all for your patience there. So we move on to the open forum. We have, could I ask councillors to stop murmuring? Thank you. So you'll just I've had 3 items, so I will call them in the order that they were handed to me. So is it Timothy Sykes? Would you like to speak now? That's your question. Direct to the microphone, please. Are you happy to be filmed?
Just to declare an interest, I'm a candidate for Trumpington, so I won't blabber too long. I would also like to say the chairs are arranged quite neatly today.
I'll explain that later.
The Jesus Green Bridge has been out of action for a very, very long time. It's been particularly inconvenient for everyone, but particularly disabled people who have had to either walk or wheel a rather long way round to get into the city centre. The three things I really want to know is why was it delayed? Why was there no proper announcement of its delay, because it is important. How much it has cost the taxpayer, and how much potentially extra it has cost because of the delay, and whether in future what processes are the council looking into to make sure that the nuisance won't happen again, because 3 bridges overall were taken out. The whole river really in this area was very, very difficult to cross, and it's caused a lot of problems, and that's all I've got to say on it. Thank you.
Okay, first thing is to explain the chair's reference. Councillor Holt Jones spent a happy half hour sorting the chairs into pretty stripes of colours. Yeah, okay, but to the serious matter, the delay, this is a county council project, so I think I'll ask our county councillors to comment on it. Councillor Manning.
Obviously this is really West Central that would probably be best taken this to, because it falls in the Market Ward. I can tell you why the Green Dragon Bridge was delayed. It's basically the same reason as the Jesus Green Bridge, which was that they found a lot more damage to it. I can't quote you numbers for either bridge. I know that the overall, there was a budget for it, there wasn't a breach for the Green Dragon Bridge, so it was bridge repairs, and I think it's a trade-off between repairing it more often, which itself is costly, and waiting for longer and possibly finding more damage. And I'm sure we can get precise figures. I'm sure Ed Kearns, who's the councillor from Market, can get precise figures for you.
Yeah, just to respond to Tim, because I'm aware that a lot of people that live in South Marbury Ward, where I think Tim lives, use that bridge, and I used it myself, and even though I knew that about its closure for a good 2 months before it actually closed, I still spent the first 4 weeks of that 10 weeks that it was supposed to be closed, arriving at the bridge and going back when the bridge is closed. So I know it's caused a lot of inconvenience, especially for cyclists, because going round and over the main roads has been really, really quite difficult, and it's been an absolute joy to have it open again. The reason why it was closed for much longer than was originally expected was because, as Ian intimated, basically once they stripped the top off to examine what the surface was like, and particularly the foundations to the ramp leading up to the bridge from Jesus Green itself, they discovered basically there wasn't a foundation, at which point they had to kind of revisit their original plans, because obviously kind of resurfacing and building that, they kind of couldn't. So they then had to actually make the plates that would fit on that ramp and then resurface it completely. So it just took a lot longer than it should have done, and that just happens sometimes when you're doing older bridges. You discover stuff that you really wish you hadn't discovered. So in this case, it's just events, dear boy. You know, it just happened. It just had to stay closed for as long as it did.
From your description, you're making it sound like having frostbite. How did it? No, sorry. One thing I would ask our county councillors to take back is the communication wasn't brilliant, because some residents contacted me, and the way I found out information was on Twitter by talking to Cambs County there, and that doesn't seem to be the most efficient way of talking.
Yeah, I was going to say actually that with the signage for the green bridge was pretty poor. We did get them afterwards to put more prominent signs in Riverside and Green End Road. I don't know what was done for the Jesus Green Bridge, but yeah, it's a problem.
I could answer that again. I mean, there was what we really needed as a leaflet drop to local residents that use the bridge. That would have been really useful to get something like that from the county. Instead, what we got was I think it might be Councillor Sales and Councillor Onsania found, or Councillor Scott actually, it's Councillor Scott who found out from the press office of the county and then circulated that to councillors, and then we disseminated it out to local residents. But in terms of signage or communication, the only communication that I was aware of was the two signs, one at the bridge, and obviously by the time you got to the Dad Bridge, that's the point at which you don't find the bridge still closed. And one, I think, that was on Carlisle Road, which wasn't really enough, given that you've got so many approaches to that bridge, and there's no other obvious logical route that doesn't take you a long way around. So yeah, I mean, if the council can consider if anything like that happens again, doing a leaflet drop, I'd be grateful.
There were two others actually. One was outside of Waterman, which was attached to the railings there, which means if you're in a car you won't see it. But of course nobody in a car would go over that bridge anyway. And the other one was right up by the crossroads at Northampton Street, both of which I pass every day. I was only inconvenienced once during that period. Yeah, the wording was very strange as well.
Okay.
Basically it said you have to go both ways.
Thank you. Right, I think that the county councillors will take that message back, and if you got anything to add to that, or are you happy to just move on?
Only that there was a only that there was a sign by the entrance to Jesus Green, the other entrance down by the Victoria Road. But thank you for your comments. They were really helpful, and hopefully everyone, and not just prolific tweeters, can get the information next time. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah. Lil Speeds, you have two questions.
Yes, please.
You can ask them both.
Yes. Apparently, I had this letter put in my door. It was addressed to Brian and my husband, which I was left out, which I expect. But I'm not going to read it all. But as one bit, what I like this person called So, who must be the same age as me, because, however, the Labour Party is demanded to take control of the City Council in May this year. They ran things here in the 80s and 90s when Cambridge had one of the worst records for collecting tax anywhere in the country. Our streets were nauseous and the amount of litter around. Now I would like to correct that, because I came to Cheston in the 60s and Labour was controlling the council. We had two
That's not accurate.
Listen, you listen to me. Labour was controlling the council. It was then what got our central heating done, our roofs done, the windows done, because they had a thing at the yard. You can check all this if you want. And we had two good housing officers who made sure that there was no untidy gardens, no fences down. They used to check your house, and if your house was dirty, they used to give you so long to clean it. Now, since the Lib Dems have been in, nothing is happening like that, and things are getting worse. And this she is not a councillor. I might as well turn around and say, I'm a councillor, but I'm not a councillor until you get elected as a councillor. So why is these lies are in your leaflet and in this letter? Go back to the
Mrs.
council.
Speed, thank you very much for that. On that item, that headline says elect another hard-working councillor. I don't want to spend a long time on this, but that's just saying it would be nice to have another hard-working councillor, and we are suggesting that our candidate would be one. And I'm
But
sure that can I finish? The Labour Party would suggest their candidate would be one too. Now that item, I'm afraid, I'm not going to take any discussion on because it is party political matter, and we'll move on. What's your second question, please?
My
Jill?
second question is, I would like to challenge you Lib Dems, including Muppet, to a private meeting to discuss things, because we have never had a public meeting with any of the councillors so we can sit down in the hall and ask them questions. Now, would you agree to this?
Lil, you're sitting down in a hall asking questions of councillors in public.
No, I'm talking about other questions. If I ask you all the questions what I want to ask you, I'll be here all night, and I don't think it's fair. I think you should agree to have a public meeting with me. I don't mind if it's just me and you, and especially him, because he ain't no good. We can't even get us cut off done.
Councillor Manning, yes. Right, moving on to Colin Davis.
You still haven't answered that question. Are you going to have a public meeting with me?
I think, Lil, that this is a public meeting where people can ask
No,
questions.
a proper
Lil, can I
public
finish, please? Okay, I did interrupt you once and you've interrupted me once, that's fair. I'm sure that you can arrange to meet your councillors. You're quite an articulate
No,
person.
not a lot, not just one.
Well, we do have other constituents and members of the public, and so we're going to move on to Colin Davison now. Thank you.
Else.
This almost sounds small beans after that. You are apt to follow. It almost seems trivial. There were a bunch of trees on Arbury Road cut down quite recently. They were on the corner of Arbury Road and near Wick, and they were bleeding horrible. They were nasty little landline trees and they fall to bits. I've lived in the Arbury since middle of 2001. Around the big noughties, Pipistrel bats started not to be roosting there, but nesting there in summer. Now, it's an atypical type of tree for them to roost in most of the time, but the really dense canopy of branches there made it an ideal site for nesting and raising their young. There were notices put on them saying they were being cut down, but of course it was winter, and you're going past there in the dark every day, and I knew nothing about them being cut down. And there was a consultation. The houses immediately next to them, the people living in were consulted, so that would be a small number of the house in that Hanson Court. You can see those trees from a lot further away. You can see them from my house, I'm on another part of Hanson Court. So the first I found out about it was when they were cutting them down. By the time that I was in touch with the guys at the City Council, the bat's roosting site was in a chipper. It's illegal to destroy a bat roosting site whether or not the bats are there at that time. I just wonder whether we could consult slightly more widely than 30 feet before going ahead with such a thing.
Yes, thank you. That was something that came before the North Area Committee last year, I believe, as part of the Environmental Improvement Programme. It's something that I've been contacted about by the residents, as you say, of Hanson Court, and as you said, bleeding horrible trees. The people living in Hanson Court lives were blighted in that they couldn't use their gardens in the summer because there was no sunshine, for all sorts of reasons. And it came to this committee, I made what I thought was a reasonably good case for those trees to be removed, which the committee presumably thought was good enough because I think, if I remember rightly, we were unanimous in that. The consultation was slightly wider in as much as it also included people on the other side of Arbury Road. So they would be people that were living in Arbury Road. I think they were consulted about it because there had been arguments before about whose view would be taken away. At no point were we, and as far as I know, the council told that there were pipistrelle bats roosting there, because as you said, it would have been illegal to have removed them. My understanding is that they are looking into, and I think it may even have been your suggestion, that some boxes could be put on some of the sides of the maisonettes along the end of Hanson Court and presumably towards the end of Albemarle Way, which may or may not be suitable for it. Look, obviously that's regrettable if they were there. These things were checked by council staff, and as far as we know, there were none. I have to say, for the first time, I was contacted straight away as soon as those trees were down by some very, very happy people that were very, very pleased that those trees had been removed.
Had it
Can
not...
I just ask a question?
Yeah, just to say, I received a number of comments, and I'm sure my colleagues did, on sort of the Arbury side, if you like, of Arbury Road. And we referred all of those to the arboricultural team and the other officers in the City Council who are dealing with this project. And at no time was it mentioned that they were pipistrelle bat roost sites. So that's obviously very unfortunate. Most of the evidence I got back to about what was planned in terms of the ley land that were there, we replaced with native species and were actually a lot more conducive to wildlife generally, were all very positive things which residents took on board. But I have to say none of us were aware, actually the council officers were not aware, that these were important roost sites. But Councillor Price has mentioned what the mitigating sort of proposals might be.
Well, just to go back to a little bit of that, as you say, horrible trees, and we have to be rid of them for the looks. And the land ice, terrible, terrible things should never be planted there. But at the same time, you didn't really consult all of the people on Hanson Court. You've seen from my back kitchen, you've seen from my back window, you know where I live, you've knocked on the door, and you know I'm almost right next to it. And if you want to know what's happening in a hedgerow, then you need to talk to the anti-naturalist who live right next to it, and I count myself as one of those. No letter came through my door, no knockers on my door. And I could have told you guys that there is a pipistrelle nesting site, and it would be better to try to resolve that before we cut the trees down, rather than when I'm cycling past in the morning with a big tick and seeing the man with a chainsaw. I just feel you're quite right to consult parallel people right next to it, but maybe that needs to be further than 30, 40 feet, maybe it needs to be the entire street, maybe it needs to be 2 streets radius. Then you'll get a lot more feedback. If there happens to be nobody living right next to it, who has been watching us back for the last 10 years, you won't find out.
We've got Mr. Bond indicated on this item, so take the microphone.
I'm surprised this is coming up now, because I seem to remember the trees went down about 12 months ago. Certainly some of them were did. But the Cambridge Bat Group has a pretty good line on what the bats are and where they are in Cambridge. And they certainly do monitor the environmental improvements. So clearly they were unaware of the alleged roost on that side. In the city, pipistrelles are actually ubiquitous. And it's very difficult often to find out where they are actually roosting. So I'm not too surprised that if there was a pipistrelle nest there, and often they will actually go through trees to hide where they actually live before going on to forage. So, bats can look after themselves pretty well.
Andy Preston, Cambridge City Council Project Building Environment Manager. Just to confirm that when our contractor did remove the trees, they found no evidence of roosting bats on those trees. That would have been illegal if they had found evidence of roosting bats on those trees, which they did not. If they had found evidence, they wouldn't have removed the trees.
A couple of minor points, just for Mr. Bond's information really. Those trees were removed, I believe, at the end of February this year. Because it was only put forward last year, and they had to go by the end of February, otherwise they would then be birds nesting in those trees, and they would have had to have stayed there for another year. For Mr. Davison, yeah, I sort of get your point maybe that we could consult on a slightly wider scale, and maybe a couple of streets round would be an idea. But you, as a bat expert, I mean, if you could live well, you're more of a bat expert than I am. You could have lived on Lavender Road, for instance, nearby me, and that would have been such a long way away. You know, we don't know who lives in the areas and what their expertise may be, so that does make it difficult. I will take on board the fact that maybe the consultation could have been slightly wider, but it still might not have included you.
I just follow that up. I do think that we need to take note of the fact that if an environment improvement programme is proposed, we probably ought to ensure that people can see the effects from their living room or I don't know, in the kitchen. I apologise. Are consulted. That's not necessarily easy, but it's something we need to know. Yeah.
Just a very brief comment actually in defence of Council Prices. I think it's just fundamentally quite hard to know how far is the correct distance. I mean, I had a case a few years ago where there was a consulting about a tree being removed, and I thought I'd gone round the whole area down both streets, and somebody pointed out that they could see it behind line of sight at a funny angle, and eventually I ended up thinking, well, maybe I need to consult everyone who uses Google Earth because it was visible there. I don't mean certainly, but I mean, I think it is quite difficult, to be fair, to work out how far you go, and then how do you take those people's views into account if they're much further away.
Just a tiny correction. The typical bats don't roost in the same place all year. They often give birth and often bring their young up in a more dense canopy than they're usually happier nesting, and they usually want something to drop out of to fly away from. When they bring up their young, they'll often use a somewhat more dense tall hedgerow, a somewhat more dense set of trees. And I'm not surprised that as they would spend about 2-3 weeks a year, maybe a little longer there, after the windiest winter of record, I'm not surprised you can find any traces in those trees. I would think it'd be quite unlikely with less brush that you find months afterwards. But at the same time, if there's any chance of getting any trusted bats just to maybe the local bat group to put up the appropriate nesting boxes for when they do return them from nesting sites, if that could be done, that would seem to be quite prudent to me.
And you first continue about again. I think we're getting into a stage. Councillor Beard does have one comment to be in my place, I think.
If I can just add to that, our ecologist who was involved in the project is actually investigating exactly that, looking in that local area to provide a replacement.
Thank you.
Councillor Beard.
Thank you, Chair. The only point I would add is maybe some quite focused consultation with wildlife groups that might be associated with the area or environmental improvement. So bird groups, bat groups, especially in parks and so on, might be a way of spreading the net wider on these issues.
Okay, we've actually run out of questions at the open forum. So what we're supposed to move on to now is the policing item, but they don't seem to be here yet. So what I'm suggesting we do is we look at item 6 on the agenda, which is proposed 20 miles per hour Victoria Road. Anyone who has told me they want to speak on that, I'll let them speak on the police item as well, because there's obviously an overlap. So we move on to that item. I'll just wait for Mr. Teston to come and join us. It's on pages 45 to 60 of your agendas. And the whole bunch of stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andy Preston, I'm Project Delivery and Environment Manager for City Council. Here this evening to present this report, which gives feedback to the committee and those present on the outcome of the consultation for Victoria Road, which, following the main North Face consultation, which was carried out as part of the city's 20 miles per hour project, determined that there was a significant number of requests for Victoria Road to be looked at, which wasn't included in that first phase of the project due to the fact it is an A road and currently against County Council policy for 20 miles per hour. The report this evening asks this committee to make a recommendation to the Executive Councillor for Planning and Climate Change, Councillor Tim Ward, present this evening, as to whether to continue to the next phase with the implementation process for Victoria Road. And that final decision will be made at Environment Scrutiny Committee on the 8th of July. We'll then move on to the County Council's governance process, which I'll come back to later on when I present the report. So, as I've already mentioned, lots of questions as to why it was included in the North Face consultation. It's explained now in the background that it's part of the NB road network, and the County Council's policy specifically precludes it at the moment. Consultation, I won't go into too much detail, but it was carried out in a similar way to the rest of the consultation that's been conducted for the 20 miles per hour project. We had a total of 540 responses to the consultation. 214 of those were from addresses within the consultation area itself, and 321 were actually from outside of the consultation area. So you can see the majority ended up coming from the outside of the area. There was quite a surge towards the end of the consultation, so I'm not quite sure what triggered that, but there was a considerable amount of responses that came from outside the area towards the end. And we've also been able to identify that 9%, so 51 responses, were actually from Victoria Road residents themselves. So those residents actually live on Victoria Road. In the appendix, there's also some graphical representation of the results. But the headline figures being that overall, so of the total 540 responses, 56% supported 20 miles per hour. Breaking that down then, 71% support was from the consultation area itself, so residents of Victoria Road and the consultation area. The area is actually in the appendix of the report, if you want to look in detail what that area was. And 69% of respondents from Victoria Road itself supported the proposed reduction in the limit. And then only 54% were then from outside of the consultation area in support. So that 54% then reduced the overall support to 56. Interesting question 5, 79% of all responses regarded themselves as residents. And so the 321 from outside the area weren't necessarily commuters or people who don't necessarily live in Cambridge, but were residents potentially that were travelling around the city. And 15% classed themselves as commuters. We had a specific response from Stagecoach, who are obviously key stakeholders of the major public transport provider, and they have objected to the reduction from 30 to 20 on the basis it is a strategic road, part of the strategic network, and an A and B road. There is a little summary there of some of the main comments, which I won't go into in too much detail. In terms of the comment section, so I've highlighted some of the most commonly referred to terms in the comment section. In terms of the speed survey results, we carried out automatic traffic count surveys, which is basically rubber strips on the road. So
Do we have comments, a summary of comments?
it's in 5.7. We've got 13 responses, taxi drivers, 56 responses, narrow pavements. Sorry, I haven't got the full agenda. So it just highlights there the most commonly referred to terms. So identify themselves, 13 responses identify themselves as taxi drivers, all negative response, 56 narrow pavements. So just to give you a
feel for some of the people commenting on in the comments section. So in terms of the speed surveys, the traffic counts were down for 2 weeks, which records data for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can see the average speeds there are at around 24 miles per hour, which, as it says in the report, is broadly in line with the guidance from Transport for the introduction of a 20 miles per hour speed limit with the signs only solution. Anything higher than that, the recommendation is that traffic calming or alternative additional measures should be implemented in order to introduce the lower limit. So the way forward, obviously this evening this committee needs to decide on the way forward in terms of a recommendation to Councillor Ward. It will then go to Environment Scrutiny Committee where the final City Council decision will be made. It then moves on to the County Council, obviously as the higher authority, who need to determine firstly whether they're happy to agree with their departure from their current policy, which basically states that 20 miles per hour can't be introduced on an ARB road. And then they'll need to decide whether they're happy to go to the statutory traffic regulation order process, which again has a formal consultation period, and objections could be received, and then will need to be determined again by the committee process, as it will be at the County Council Highways and Community Infrastructure Committee. Just to mention that the Stagecoach, as a public transport provider, are one of the only respondees or objectors that could take this to a public inquiry. It is the only objection that cannot be determined by the County Council's committee. It would have to be a public inquiry to determine that objection. Initial feedback from county officers, they're looking at the majority of support not being there from the overall response. So rather than looking just at the local response being at 71%, they're looking at the overall. Obviously, it is a strategic road. It's not just a residential street. I know it has very much the appearance of a residential street in terms of its road environment, and is probably more suited to 20 miles per hour in that respect. But there are other considerations, such as the fact that it is a major bus route, and that it is part of the ring road of the city. So at the moment, their initial feedback is that they're recommending it for approval. Is the current position, but also that has potential for change, particularly county councils involved, etc. On that point, I will hand over for discussion.
I would just say at this point that the wheels of bureaucracy grind slowly and grind high, and that's quite clearly illustrated in this. We are making a decision to recommend that another body asks, that another body puts in process a statutory process that will probably result in a public inquiry. Everyone follow that? Good. So, we have a couple of members of the public who indicated they wanted to speak about Victoria Road. Kay Harris was first, Bill Driver, and I'll add you as well. So, Kay Harris first, if the microphone could make its way across.
Thank you. I've been asked to speak this evening on this by some of the local residents from Histon Road, Victoria Road, who are rather against 20 miles an hour in Victoria Road, unless, of course, it can be done by, say, 10 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, when there is freedom on the road there for people to go above the 20 mile an hour quoted in your statement here. We're also greatly concerned that the 20 mile an hour slowness, as it's been called, will also bring problems into Histon Road. And the snarl up on the road that I couldn't remember what it's called, that leads out to Castle Hill. I think it's Morden Road or something. I don't know what it's called. I hope it's remembered name. But that's the basic point we want to make. The snarl up the traffic it can cause. And the fact that already you've done a survey that says that you've average speed of 5 miles an hour, so why do you want to bring it down to 20? Thank you.
Mr. Grant.
Hello. I live on Victoria Road, and my only comment is that if you introduce a 20 mile an hour speed limit, which I agree with that it won't be enforced as the overnight ban on heavy trucks is being enforced. And we regularly, I don't, in my house, our bedrooms around the back, so we don't tend to hear trucks, but now and again I sleep at the front of the house. I must admit, they fly past, and there's no regular pattern to the trucks, and some of them absolutely tear down there at night. There's no pleasing. Yeah. Do you want to comment?
I share your frustration. I spent some time trying to find a regular pattern by talking to a resident, it was just, there was no time you could tell the police.
Yeah.
Mr. Sykes, and then back to Kay. Mr. Sykes first, then Kay. Sorry, Kay. Yeah.
I'm generally supportive of the proposals. I live on one of the roads that connects to Victoria Road. My concern about the 20 mile an hour limit is that people will use these side roads as a rat run, making much more residential streets than Victoria Road. Very, very dangerous to travel along, because you have people going very, very fast down them to make a shortcut between Victoria Road and Chesterton Road at the bottom. So I would like to see some enforcement on the road. A camera if it's affordable, or something like that. But it's a good idea, it just needs enforcement, really.
Okay, sorry about that, okay.
I was actually just agreeing with the gentleman there, actually, surprisingly enough, that the main problem with the traffic flow for speed is late at night on Victoria Road. It's not so much during the day, because there is a volume of traffic. And with the another point with the 20 mile an hour, which we broke, I will tell you, coming down Albury Road today, so don't give us a ticket for it, was the very simple reason that we had somebody behind us trying to do a lot more than 20 miles an hour. And if we hadn't speeded up just over 20 miles an hour, we could have been in a very bad accident. So I think there's got to be a lot more consideration on some of the roads that you've got 20 miles an hour in before you would go any further.
Yeah. And I'll invite you to speak again later, or if they feel they need to, because Sergeant Max heard it, I don't think he's actually been here. So I just apologise in public to Sergeant Max. If you'd been here 5 minutes earlier, we would have changed the order, and I now feel very better. Did you indicate?
Could I ask you a quick question about driving speeds?
Yes.
Is that obtained by, sorry, I'll probably say it again with the microphone. If I ask you a question about the average speed, is that obtained by having one point and measuring the speed of the vehicle moving over that point? Or is it averaging the speed of the vehicle down the road?
No, it's the average of all vehicles passing that particular point. So there's potentially 10, 14,000 items of data for that exact location. In terms of the speeds, it's the average of all that for that exact location. It's not an average, as in an average speed camera where it measures the average speed of that vehicle for the whole duration of the street. It's the average speed of all vehicles at that location.
So that would mean that if you were to look at the road as a whole, all the places where they have to stop the traffic lights and the place at the end of Snarlops where there's always going to be some queuing traffic, the actual average speed over the whole length of the road would probably be lower than that, because this is one of the places where the traffic's likely to be moving.
Potentially, we particularly target the location where the traffic is free to move, so we're getting almost the maximum average. See what I'm saying? The worst case scenario for that particular street, we don't locate those the data collection points where there is the potential for other things to be slowing down the traffic. It's trying to get an accurate record of the speed of vehicles.
So naturally, does modelling of the traffic flow in Mistral indicate that at 20 miles an hour, those snarl-ups might be less of an issue, and that the total time spent going down the road will be similar?
There is evidence, actually, that 20 miles per hour will reduce congestion, because the vehicles on the road are travelling at a slower speed. All the vehicles that are trying to access from side streets can access with those vehicles closer than if they were travelling at 30. So there is evidence building. It's not actually written as such yet, because 20 mile an hour is obviously building across the whole country in many, many cities, and it will be there at the end, but there is evidence potentially that it will reduce congestion, not actually increase it.
It makes sense. Thank you. Councillor Ward indicated on the... Councillor
Yeah, I've got a couple of peripheral issues to pick up here. On the trucks, if a Victoria Road resident happens to be waiting, looking out of their window and observing what's written on the side of the trucks and reports it to the City Council, we have on occasion talked to the owners of the trucks who have then instructed their drivers to behave themselves, and that probably works a bit, although obviously it's not going to get every last truck. On rats running through the triangle from Victoria Road down to Chesterton Road, this committee did consider a number of years ago some environmental improvements which involved traffic calming for that area, and it went through several phases of consultation, but the people of the area just could not agree as to what was going to go where, so the money was spent in Abbey instead where they could agree what they wanted. And finally, I'd just like to say, I had emails from two residents, one on Victoria Road, one just off, who were unable to be here tonight, but would have wanted to come along and say that they supported the scheme.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come back to some points that Tim actually raised. I had quite a number of emails from residents, all of which have been heavily in favour. To bolster what Tim's just said about the rat runs down the side routes, I point out to the other Tim that actually they're already 20 miles an hour. So there's, I'm not quite sure exactly the point you were making with that. But again, with Tim, we've also gone and spoken to local residents in the local streets, including one in which you live, and there isn't any consensus whatsoever for any traffic calming whatsoever, which is why it hasn't been taken forward from that. In terms of the enforcement of the weight limits, this is extremely frustrating. This is something that I've been trying to chase up with the county now for the past, since I was elected, basically. My particular favourite response, which was from I don't remember the exact department now. It was the trades in the enforcement, I can't remember the name of it now. They suggested that residents, when they were woken up by extremely heavy traffic that was breaching the weight limit, should have to get up in their pajamas and go out and take a picture of it. Which always said certain practical problems, which I did mention, but they seem to have stopped responding to me entirely. But we are trying to chase that up and trying to get something done, because it is impractical that if you're being woken up at 2, 3, 5 in the morning by extremely heavy traffic, which is particularly bad when there's problems on the A14, because it seems now to be habit for certain really, really heavy lorries just to say, oh, sorry, we'll go down Histon Road and Victoria Road. And because of the narrow nature of Victoria Road and the architecture of those houses, the structure of those houses, the whole house is shaking. And you can actually feel the whole house shake when you've got this really, really heavy traffic there. But yeah, working on that, not getting very far, I'm afraid. Other issues on this, I was going to try not to be terribly repetitive tonight and repeat what everybody else said, but I've been looking at the stuff that Andy mentioned, the words here that have been highlighted in some of the responses, and I'm going to have to repeat them. Victoria Road is a really, really narrow residential road. There's two main crossings. One right at the very, very end by Mr. Road, and one at the crossing by what I still call the Maze, which is now, I think, Victoria Road Store. And that's it, which means that anybody using any other route to get across Victoria Road is crossing into traffic without any kind of zebra crossing or whatever else. Now, this is an issue because the natural strategic routes from north to south of the city pass across Victoria Road, but not even in the crossings necessarily. People head down towards the footbridge we've just been discussing. And to get there, quite a lot of the time they'll cut down Garden Walk and then down on Fisher Street and down Carlisle Road. There's no crossings there. The entrance, the back entrance to Chesterton School lies down at the end of Garden Walk. So you've got a load of kids heading to school across Victoria Road there. When you've got the lowest level of traffic tends to be at the rush hour. So I would say that the average speed that's being recorded is being slowed by the fact that it grinds to a halt for about 2 hours between 4 and 6. But that doesn't actually coincide with when kids are using it, when the most vulnerable users are crossing that strategic route across that goes from Garden Walk down to the cycle bridge, where we're deliberately channeling people so that they're not using the main roads. So there's a lot of sort of, I don't know, very local information, I suppose, about Victoria Road, which makes it more residential and more vulnerable than almost any other A road, or even any other major road like in the city. It's got 2 nursery schools, as well as being right close next to the secondary school I mentioned. 2 nursery schools actually on the road itself. You've got St Luke's Primary School, which is just up the road, so again, people heading to St Luke's have to cross that very, very busy road, usually without a crossing. You've got sheltered housing. I mean, it's just this, the pavements themselves are so narrow that on bin days, you see parents taking their kids to school who are pushing their prams into oncoming traffic because there's no other way for them to use the pavement. And the kids trying to cycle to school, it's too busy for them and they're too afraid to stay on the road to turn right. So again, they end up on the pavement or end up pushing their bikes into oncoming traffic. So for these reasons and many others, I feel really, really, really strongly that Victoria Road should be included in a 20-mile-an-hour zone. And, you know, granted, I'm biased, I live on the road, I see this every single day. But speaking to residents and looking at the statistics that you brought, Andy, it was actually quite striking to me. I would have expected to see perhaps 70-odd% of residents on Victoria Road itself be heavily in favour, but not the wider consultation zone. To have that kind of response from people in the wider consultation zone tells me that there's actually a lot of feeling that it is dangerous as it stands at the moment for everybody that has to use it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, really, Stagecoach's objections, this is about protecting vulnerable residents, not protecting Stagecoach's profits. And we should be, you know, I think this committee's decision is do we want it in principle. It's for the county. I think we should decouple that from whether the county get a legal challenge from Stagecoach and they take that forward. I do remember that Andy Campbell tried to pull the same stunt with the 17 bus in our division in East Chesterton and tried to claim that it would it would kill it. Actually, what he was complaining about was Coldham's Lane, which is in another division. When it was pointed out that wouldn't be 20 miles an hour because it wasn't appropriate, he said he then backed down. So I can fully support this, and I think I'm going to say it's about protecting vulnerable residents.
Well, Michael James and Councillor Boyce can ask you. I'll run Councillor Ward again, Andy, but Councillor James.
Yes, just a couple of points. Councillor Riley covered a lot of them, but something that's been mentioned by many residents to me in Victoria Road over the years is, I think, and it all ties in with the general nature of the street being suited to reducing traffic speed, and I think the substructure of the road is linked directly to the foundation of houses, especially the narrow section where houses front almost directly onto the pavement and the carriageway. So again, it had a particular impact in terms of heavy volume of vehicles using the road, but the traffic generally, I think the houses are particularly subject to result to vibration and so forth because of the link to the substructure on the road.
Councillor Boyce.
Yes, a couple of quick comments. One of the things I've been saying for years is why is Victoria Road an A road in the first place? Why has Cambridge got such a wonky ring road? It doesn't really work. So part of the argument the county has is something doesn't work. In addition to which, a couple of years ago, there was a sewer collapse in the middle of Victoria Road and it was completely closed for 6 months. And Armageddon did not happen. So the argument that it's a vital part of the road network simply doesn't hold water. In fact, when I put my comment on the original consultation, I said declassify Victoria Road, then make it 20 mile an hour. Because I've always felt that declassifying it is part of the process, but it looks like we might get away without that. I've been campaigning in West Chesterton, for those who don't know, about 34 years, and it was one of the first issues we picked up. The other one we picked up very early on was Harbury Road, which now has a 20 mile an hour limit, traffic calming, and all sorts of other things, which means that we've actually got somewhere in that 30 years. It's taken a very long time, and the roadblock, if I can use that term in this context, has always been the attitude of the county council towards things like this in Cambridge. But the evidence is mounting that their objections are not really as strong as they would like to make out. It would be very nice for me to be able to sign off, the chair indicated earlier that I'm standing down, sign off my last committee as a member of the council, actually voting for something that I've been trying to get through donkey's years. All the rooms have come together at the right time just as I'm standing down, so in a sense I'm rather sad that I won't see it right through to the bitter end. Although, as a resident very close to Victoria Road, I live just off Mitchell's Corner, I will be very, very much affected by it.
Thank you.
Yes, the diverted trucks on Victoria, Road, following their sat-navs, which presumably sending them down what according to sat-nav is a perfectly good A road, and that is indeed part of the problem. It is official city council policy that this A road status of the road be reviewed, because I managed to sneak that into the city's official response to the county council's strategic transport plan review. So these things are all pushing in the same direction. Another scheme that is sort of maybe going to happen one of these years is a complete remodelling of Mitcham's Corner, which I made sure is on the list of projects to be considered for the city deal. Not unfortunately the first list, but the second tranche to be looked at sometime later. So it seems to me the declassification of Victoria Road would go with quite well with the remodelling of Mitcham's Corner, and it seems to me that voting tonight to make Victoria Road 20 miles an hour would be a step on that direction. Now obviously I support this because 70% of my residents, as I'm a ward councillor, want this to happen, but I also get to see the wider view as I'm City Council's lead councillor on transport matters. I spend an awful lot of time talking to county councillors in South Cambridgeshire and joint committee meetings and reading transport strategy documents and so on. So I get the wider view, and from the wider view of the transport priorities for the Greater Cambridge area, I have been able to see absolutely no reason not to make Victoria Road 20 miles an hour.
Right, thank you. Do you have something new?
Oh, only
Slightly.
Just very briefly, I think of all the comments that I've seen and read here, the 13 responses, all negative from people identifying themselves as taxi drivers, says it all for me, really. Vested interests and all that, I'm not surprised by that, but I do support this 20 mile an hour limit in Victoria Road. I've got lots of things I did there.
Sadly, yes. I'll swap with someone who didn't. There's a woman from Mr. Driver, sorry.
I've got one more comment, and you've probably thought about this. Have you ever thought of one-way streets?
It is something that I as a lot of my speculation on ward councillors, I will confess, that knows the conclusion as to which way. Mr. Feston.
One thing that immediately comes to mind with a one-way street, particularly for Victoria Road, is that it has the potential to speed up vehicles quite considerably, because you would have to considerably narrow the road, so you wouldn't be able to just turn into a one-way street. You would need to considerably narrow it further, which is extremely expensive in terms of movements of curb lines. That would be the predominant issue, but one-way streets do generally have a detrimental effect on the average speed of vehicles.
I'd rather try and wrap this up, but I'm sorry about that. It's just, I just want to say that as a ward councillor, I do support this, but I do just want to make the point to manage expectations that what we are doing is would it be very quick, Leila? Yeah. Okay. And in this case, I'll let him speak as well, to be fair. So.
Another question. Apparently, Ramsey Square. Now, we were in the community centre a couple of weeks ago, and they had put this orange on each side of the road for 20 miles an hour. Well, the week after, they had tarmacked over it, and I wasn't very happy about this because the city council and the county council passed it back to each other. And I don't know whether it's back now, but the young lady over there is going to check it out.
We'll take a note of it.
Yes, because I'm sorry, I don't like to waste money, I like to save money.
Tim, yeah.
Okay?
Lansdowne Square, the 20 mile an hour tarmac. Is it? Okay, it's been dealt with.
Leila, I'm going to deal with that as extending. I'm going to send an email to sort that out straight after the meeting.
Thank you. Tim?
Just looking sometime in the future, there's going to be a lot more residences around there. They're planning to knock down the current job centre and replace it with flats. So looking forward, there's going to be a lot more on the roads and possibly another reason for 20 miles an hour there. Thank you.
Agreed. So I just said ward councillor, ward councillor, I support it. I'm not going to repeat all the arguments because people have done it better than I would, but I just want to remind people that we're going to be here for still a long way to go. It's not until July the City Council signs off, and I would be shocked if it gets through county cabinet, but it doesn't go to a public inquiry, so people do need to be aware of that. Okay, having said all that, should we move to the vote? With apologies to Sergeant Brown for keeping you waiting. Move to the vote. Those in favour of recommending that the Executive Councillor, sitting on my right, ask the County Council to approve a 20-mile-an-hour limit on Victoria Road as per the consultation, please show. It's unanimous. We should probably report that the county councillors were also unanimous and the city councillors were unanimous, so that we don't get into.
Probably you raised an issue about police officers being out in fluorescent jackets. We still catch people, just like the yellow speed camera still catch people, and it does send out a message that we are there and we are enforcing it. I believe we've got a number of things in the pipeline, one of which is speed surveys, so we can better prioritise where we need to be focusing on enforcement, because of course this potentially represents quite a large body of new work for us. I won't go on because we're still very new, dealing with the 20 miles per hour limit. Tied onto the back of that was the old chestnut of Fen Road and social driving, and we enlisted our road policing unit. They've been down there they had a daily tasking, so where they didn't have something more urgent, so i.e. a fatal accident or something quite serious, they would be down there for periods of an hour at a time. I stipulated that we do that because news quickly gets around, and they did some wonderful work. They gave out a lot of tickets for no seatbelt, for using mobile phones, all sorts of stuff that really aggravate the driving situation on Fen Road. The local team, we've been involved as well. We've been involved on the other side of the railway tracks in South Cambs, but albeit we police the area, dealing with pretty much the same guys that are causing the nuisance on Fen Road, driving up and down, smoking cannabis, hanging around, antisocial behaviour on, for example, the industrial estates down there. I know Councillor Manning has disappeared, as I'm going to. There is. Councillor Manning is. Just about talking about your intelligent speed bumps. First Councillor Manning onto a colleague of mine who works in the accident reduction unit, and we are sort of trialling the use of intelligent speed bumps. I don't know if you want to quickly.
So this boils down to the county officers come up with these signs for speed humps, which basically go down before they go up, is the fundamental difference. And I was concerned that if we were going to go with, in any sense, go with these, then we need to actually test them with the profile of the drivers that we're all concerned about, shall we say. So I've spoken to your colleague, and that should be going ahead. Basically, we've got to go to the company and ask them for a sample, but we're not making it. Either they supply us with some data that shows that you can drive on these things at 60 miles an hour and it actually has some sort of effect, it's better than normal speed hump. And if they can't show us that, then they give us a sample that we try it out with a police driver. And if they don't give us a sample, then we're not going to buy it from them, frankly, because if we can't test it or show, well, they give us some convincing data, or I mean, like a video or something like that shows us it, then there's very little point in risking best part of 150 grand on something new.
I think we discussed Fen Road on numerous occasions in the past. I mean, the biggest issue there is the speed, the traffic calming measures seem to cause some of the problem there. They're quite ineffectual, they cause people to swerve in and out because there are large gaps in between them, etc., etc. Drug dealing, Class A drug dealing, it's been a priority twice over the last two periods. We've continued to enjoy great success in this area in terms of catching people, taking drugs, taking money from the criminals off the streets. But it continues. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount of money to be made in dealing Class A drugs. I mean, I would suggest that I'd say on any given day in the north of Cambridge, you've got about 4 or 5 drug dealing groups set up, supplying Class A, probably turning around £2,000 or £3,000 a day. So there's a lot of money in it. Unfortunately, there seems to be a lot of young men down in London who are reasonably dispensable to their leaders. because most of it does appear to be gang related, and they just keep coming. I mean, if I talk about some of our successes, so 13 suspected Class A drug dealers were arrested. Many of those arrested were young men from London with gang affiliations. One was actually from Liverpool with gang affiliations, but he was the exception that proved the rule. We had a notable success, and I'll talk about this because I'll go on to the recommendations in a moment. Two of us were successful in arresting 5 young men who were from a gang in London for supplying Class A drugs for their part in a stabbing incident where 2 groups had met. One group had robbed another group. They then met up somewhere, I'm not sure whether deliberately or whether one group had encountered the others. 2 young men were stabbed during the course of that altercation. We came across them in a flat the following morning and were able to detain 5 of them with the knives, with some blood still on the knives, although with no complaints, no external witnesses. I don't know how far we're going to get with prosecuting that. But certainly had a lot of Class A drugs on them, a large quantity of money, we're talking over £1,000 again in cash, which had been taken off the street. I mean, as soon as we arrest these people, unfortunately it's quite a lengthy process to deal with them because we need to identify the drugs, we need to interrogate mobile phones, for example, look at forensics, look at fingerprinting on different, so we sometimes get what we call a debt sheet, which is a book of accounts, that they often keep to see how much money they've made, who they've dealt to, etc. Look at fingerprinting, that type of stuff. So sometimes it can take 2 or 3 months before an investigation reaches fruition, sometimes even longer than that. But we do give bail conditions not to come back to Cambridge, unless they happen to be a resident here or have some very good reason for being in Cambridge, which the majority of them don't. I'm going to move on to the recommendations now because that joins up quite nicely. Although we're asking for this Class A drug dealer to stay on, we are on top of it at the moment. The feedback we get on the streets from many drug users is that people are reluctant to come to Cambridge and apparently Luton, because Luton is not proactive drug squad, and our neighbourhood teams in Cambridge are very proactive in dealing with Class A drugs. So they're aware that when they come to Cambridge, there's a very good chance they're going to get caught, and obviously, I think one thing we do need is some examples being made in the courts and that being publicised, because undoubtedly, we've raided properties and found them with the Cambridge Evening News open with easy pickings in Cambridge. The article talking about coming to Cambridge to supply drugs, articles on their mobile phones talking about drug supply in Cambridge. So I think if we could have a few good news stories about hefty sentences being dished out by Cambridge judges, then that might well have an impact. Unfortunately, some of these guys are quite young in age and have very little else on their record, which of course doesn't always lend itself to getting a decent sentence when they do appear in court. Just last week, I was visiting a flat. I happened to notice a back door of another flat, a ground floor flat, open. It's a flat that we've raided before for drugs. It's a flat that a few weeks earlier, a couple of guys had come out of, and we caught them with Class A drugs on them. Young guy comes out of there, so I go down the stairs, I sort of follow him, I see him do a deal in the bin shed doorway to a known drug addict. I arrested him, he had a bit of a chase, a hoo-ha, but eventually he came back to custody. And after a while, he produced from his backside some Class A drugs. I think last time people were going to raise their questions about the way we address the fact that people do store drugs internally. On this occasion, we didn't require any extra assistance from the magistrates court or anything like that. I think he kind of resigned himself to, I'm going to be here for a long time, and he bottomed out. Tried to hand him to the officer who was watching him, declined for a few moments. So, but the life aspect of the fact that what we don't want is some sort of turf war. There's a lot of money to be made. I mean, we are recommending this as as a continued priority. Let me just try and find the other recommendation. Sorry, of course, 20 mile per hour limit in the road safety thing. We've been running Operation Safe Passage as well, mainly the city centre areas. that has crept into the north area on a couple of roads, and I know we're looking at extending into other areas. I think actually into sort of Victoria Road area, perhaps even that triangle, where we're looking at road safety for everybody, for cars, for bikes, you know, sort of addressing everybody across the board. I believe that's been quite successful in the west area, the city centre area, which are quite closely connected. I imagine that we've just been implementing the 20-mile-per-hour limit, that we will be looking to address that and hopefully iron out a few issues. I know some of the feedback we've had from officers trying to enforce it and members of the public who've been stopped is they're complaining about signage and it not being consistent in certain areas. I mean, it's early days yet, I don't know whether anybody else has considered that. No. Maybe it's just a bit of a red herring at this moment in time. Something else, it's not written down here, but we did it this time last year. We looked at green areas, antisocial behaviour patrols in green areas, just to nip in the bud any building of views in the warmer weather, you know, longer days. You know, we have in the past obviously had organised fights and other trouble, you know, in the grass areas. It seemed to work very well last year, so I put that up myself. In terms of the crime figures, you can see the data. I'm sure I'll take a few questions on it in a moment. One question which I know we've talked about before, it was raised last time, is what is other crime? Does anybody want to know what other crime is? I think we have talked about it before. Other crime would be things like theft in a dwelling, where, for example, in a shared house, somebody would take somebody else's cutlery or whatever, a student, they might be familiar with that. Theft other, so that's something which isn't the theft of a bike, or it's not a shoplifting where in a school perhaps somebody's nicked somebody else's phone. Possession of cannabis. People ask for what are the main trends for other crime. Possession of crack cannabis. So in the last 3 months, we've had 19 possession of cannabis in the north area. And at certain times, I mean, in warm weather, I would expect that to increase. We've had 10 Class A drug offences in that period as well. Public order offences, arson. We don't have a particular problem with arson at the moment, but we occasionally get a little spate in Malvern Hazel Close, which unfortunately fire on here, but we dealt with in conjunction with fire. There's a guy who's quite well known for fire starting, moved into the area, and coincidentally, in a few big fires in the car park behind his flat. So that seems to have been addressed now. So that is other crime, and the main thrust of other crime would be different thefts of shoplifting and bikes and drugs offences.
You make these things sound so glamorous. Last time we had the case of the trouserless man. Yes. Not going to dwell on today's story. Before we go on to questions from the public, just one thing. Normally, in the past, we've had 3 recommendations. Today there's 2. Would you welcome a third, or is it the case that there's 2 because of the scale of the... Oh, he's added one.
Yeah, I mean, I suggested today it's being green areas.
Okay.
I think it would take dividends to do that as well. So, I mean, if that was to be accepted, then it would be free.
Okay, so we will start. I've got some paper, then I'll go for the first topic. Mr. Grinder, do you want to speak on the
you were here and I mentioned.
Well, was it?
Yeah, okay. Leila?
Yes, please. Yes, please. I know you spent £800,000 so I'm going to keep cash. Now, what happens when you give our money back?
Can you just...
Okay.
Can't hear that, please.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I presume that all the money we spent on this scheme, which is 800,000 as well within the town hire. I'd like to know, please, how the police can look at all the streets at 20 miles speed limit, who's assessing it, and can they hold up a traffic warden? I don't want to have a fight, no, nobody else does. But there is tonight, there was 3 speeders around and I was taking care and coming towards me and going down the other day, you know. Some people want to obey the law, okay? So I'm sorry, you need a traffic warden to assess the streets that you can cope with, because you can't cope with them all, can you?
We can't, sorry, I missed some of what you were saying there.
So you can't cope with all the streets for fines.
No, and
so you need somebody like a traffic warden to do this, because otherwise, well, all that money we spent for this project, how are we going to get it all back?
I think that's just asking for more enforcement and more visible enforcement.
Sure, I mean as I said, I mean, one of the things we look at doing is speed surveys, when we get the wires out on the road, we sort of gauge where best we can allocate our resources. You know, as I say, it's early days yet. We're trying to assess how best to address that problem. We've got quite a few plans up our sleeve.
Yeah. Okay, that's on a different issue. So.
Right, the surveillance.
Yes.
Good. Actually, I will, before I go to that, just take a point that I noticed that on the report in the paper here, the King's Hedges have the highest crime rate of the area. Which brings me to the point, and the point you were just making about drugs, that will we see a higher percentage of surveillance during the summer? King's Hedges does have some PCSOs. Not that we hardly ever see them because they're always being called away to do something else. But as I say, my point is, particularly evening times, when they're walking, you know, they're fed up and they've walked down Downlands Lane and they've had their cigarettes all the way going down Downlands Lane and smell what's over to us.
So are you supporting the continuing work on?
I am, most definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I've got.
And Wilson Close, the housing officers are very much aware of what is going on there.
Tim, and then Mr. Page.
I'm generally supportive of the proposals, and I just want to add that I want to commend the police on their work. They are very short-staffed due to government cuts and the work that you do is good, and I just want to say that from a member of the public perspective.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Manning's mentioned some of the proposals for Fen Road, and I've seen some of those because Councillor Manning's put them on a Google form survey that he's running, and I'd just like them to be made public a bit more formally. I went to look for them on the County Council Consultations website, they weren't there, or even to be brought to this meeting, so they can be brought properly into the public domain. Something else I'd like to mention is on the 2nd of April I went to a ward-based policing meeting in King's Hedges. That hasn't been mentioned in your report, even though smaller meetings have been surgery meetings. So I'd like to repeat a suggestion that's been made over many, many years, that these ward-based policing meetings, the outcomes from them, come here so that you can consider them when you're setting the priorities. So I'd like to tell you tonight the two things which were mentioned at that meeting, and we had almost as many members of the public at that meeting as there are here tonight. The first one, top issue, was dog fouling. People had seen the eyes posters which were up around King's Hedges, so something I was expecting I might find in the report, the City Council element of the report tonight, was actually the statistics and shows how effective that eyes poster campaign has been in the north of the city. The other item that was raised was littering, particularly on Camkin Road outside Tesco's, with the allegation being made there that it was mainly down to students. And the comment that was made was that the police are unwilling to take any action due to the fact they don't want to criminalise young people, which I completely agree with, but I would hope to see other routes being used, particularly as the council may well end up with more enforcement officers, and the police have options to deal with things without criminalising people.
Do you want us to speak about that?
Obviously the reason you got the email, which was because you were on the list from the Fenway steering group, which was originally invited in public, and when we originally started, it was invited in public, and here was a leaflet dropped between myself and other councillors, so that was the reason we got that. It was all advertised quite publicly. The time scale for the money, and because of course we're in the herd period, the officers couldn't put it up because it's being partly run by City Council officers. So the reason I did was because I was trying to, it will eventually obviously go to a formal consultation where it will be formally advertised, but as we all experience, the more informal consultation you can do, the better the formal consultation is. So it's all been advertised publicly, and that was just an additional extra step I was doing as a Ward County Councillor.
Councillor Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a brief response to Mr. Taylor's report, if you like, from the King's Hedges Anti-Social Behaviour meeting, which he was at. There are slightly fewer people there than there are here, but I take the point, there were a sizable number, and as you're aware, I was there. The littering, which I think it was me that explained it, that what the reason there was very little enforcement was not the police. city council enforcement officers who do not issue enforcement notices to those under 18 in order to prevent them from possibly not paying their fine, and or their parents not paying their fine for them, and then getting a criminal record. That's not, as far as I'm aware anyway, I don't think the police draw that distinction. Maybe Jason will be able to tell us differently. There was also a suggestion at that meeting, which somehow made its way into the Cambridge News, can't think how, that there was a gentleman there who was most concerned about littering in King's Hedges, and he suggested that the reason there was so much littering in King's Hedges was because people of King's Hedges are anti-monarchist, and because it's called King's Hedges, they littered, which I think I sort of put completely in its place at the time, and was slightly disappointed to find that something like that made its way into the paper. But hey, these things have a habit of getting there, don't they, Richard?
Councillor Ward.
Yes, on the road safety issue, now that the 20-mile-an-hour scheme has been in place for a while, councillors would have been getting comments, complaints, whatever, from members of the public about specific locations which could do with detention, which I suppose is helpful for us to pass on to the police. The two that I've got, one from several people has been Arbury Road, which you already know about, and the other, which I've also had from several people, is in fact a 30 kilometre, which is the top end of Histon Road. So as a recommendation is for road safety issues more widely than 20 miles an hour. I wonder if a session or two could be taking place at top end of Histon Road as well.
Okay, so I thought that was related to the points raised by the public, so I want to take the other members of the public before going to other councillors. So I'll put you on my list, Damien. On the point of Campton Road, one of the problems I remember from my time as a King's Hedges ward councillor is the perpetual new student syndrome. Every year, roughly a half, slightly under, because of people on long courses, of the students at CLC get replaced. So every year we went through the same routine, and in some years it got better, and in other years it didn't. And that does make things very difficult. In my time, there wasn't that policy of not issuing tickets to under 18s. I'm wondering if that's a change.
Funding your council, I've actually
So, Councillor Grant.
I do think it's important not to just blame students from CRC entirely, because it isn't just them, because there's litter there when the students aren't there. The point is there is a lot more litter there in that area when they're not there. I hate anyone to think that everything was entirely down to students at CRC, because it's not.
Okay, I've got Mr. Bond, Mr. Kay, and Mr. Davis have indicated to speak about this. Yeah, so we'll work our way forward from Mr. Kay. Did I say Mr. Kay?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much to the North Police team for actually starting to enforce the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I was delighted to see the crew in Arbury Road a couple of days after the scheme started, and I noted that someone sailed past me who was well over 20 miles an hour, that was pulled in, and that was a great pleasure. I saw last week when I was driving and being very careful. It's actually quite difficult to keep down to 20 sometimes. So, no, thank you very much for that.
Keep up the hard work, Mr. Bond, that's all we can say on that one. Kay.
Oh, should I just shout then?
No, it's coming.
It's coming, sorry.
Okay. Yes, this is a question for Jason actually. Jason, when we had your police commissioner here, I spoke to him about valuing the officers on the beach, basically, because he spoke of encouraging them and having more of them. His question was actually to say, future plans include technology, smartphones. I'm much more interested in the fact that when he's got himself sorted out, he's got all his little plans in place, are we actually going to see more people on the beach? And the second point I want to make very quickly is about 20-mile-an-hour zone. it needs to be enforced from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock at night. That's when the speed problems occur. That's when Karina gets woken up. Everybody's got a neighbour who runs their washing machine at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can tell you what it's like.
That's also when people go down Northfield Avenue at 70 miles per hour.
That's very true.
Mr. Davis.
Down round our bend.
Have you got your video camera yet?
I've just had an idea what sitting here and listening to this. Riding down Arbury Road last Friday, there's 3 of Sergeant Ragg's colleagues standing there, and you can see them not just from the end of Arbury Road, you can probably see them from Mars. So I stopped and had a chat with them, really nice chaps, there's a lady on the other side of the road with a speaker, and they're telling me that they're still catching people. Now I'm comparing riding back on Friday, and it's like suddenly everybody's an angel. They're all driving at the same speed at under 20 miles an hour, and I'm keeping up with the traffic, and it's great. I'm comparing that with riding down Arbury Road today, where it genuinely feels like they resent the air I breathe because they'd rather that was burning some petrol in their engines because they're still walking past you, even though you're in the same streets of traffic. Now, policing that with 3 police officers every day, not going to happen, very expensive, it's not good resources. But the motorists can't see it's 3 police officers, what they can see is 3 people with yellow, one with what might be a speed gun. Stop me if this is a crazy idea, but how much would some dummies cost? Seriously, how much would some dummies cost? Put them by the roads wearing yellow day glove, one with a fake speed gun, it would be trumpet or medical or whatever it is. Move them around. I bet you'll see immediate reductions in speed on those roads. It looks like there might be some problems with speed guns.
I've always advocated carbon cutouts.
Not quite as I was going to say, not quite as unusual idea as you think. I mean, obviously, I know we've used cardboard cutouts before. I mean, nationally, the police have used cardboard cutouts. In shots, for example, and even though people are aware it's a cardboard cutout, the fact there's an image, a life-size image of a police officer, it would appear would deter somebody. I guess the issue would be is where would you put these dummies, cardboard cutouts? Where they're not going to be knocked down, vandalised, whatever.
Sergeant Van Lane speak for I've got a lot of Mr. Councillors. Riley, Todd Jones, Manning, Tunnett, if anyone else would be dated for approval, really. Oh, wow. Yes. How was it?
Thank you, Chair. Just in general, Jason, I'm quite content with what you suggested. I think that it's a good idea that we keep on having 20 miles an hour as a priority, and I think we have to. I'm quite content to also go the other 2 priorities that you mentioned. I think one was Class A drug dealing, and the other was stopping young people stacking up. Just in the 20 mile an hour priority, I think several of us may end up mentioning the same kind of thing, which is hotspots, which we think might need an extra bit of enforcement. It was interesting that Tim talked about 30 mile an hour at the top end of Histon Road. I've got a lot of local residents in Roseford Road, which is basically the first left turn off Histon Road. So I think what's happening in Roseford Road is that people are coming barreling off the A14 at 40 miles an hour. They're not slowing down at Histon Road very much. They're turning left into Roseford Road and they're not slowing down at all. And although that's actually now a 20 mile an hour zone, because it's a wide straight road, you're not getting people slow down. So I've had a lot of complaints about speeding there before 20 mile an hour.
But it's a referendum, isn't it? I mean, then down Perth Way.
Yeah, I think that we're going to talk about environmental improvements and see if we can do something, consult with residents and slowing that whole run down anyway. But if it were possible to look at that whole area, I think residents would be quite grateful that the top end is turning into Roseford, which would kill 2 birds with 1 stone probably.
Well, I think the road environment is changing all the time with 20 mile per hour limits. I mean, Fen Road with, all the suggestions we've got going on, Fallowfields, which is just off Fen Road, which is basically a circuit. We've supported the council in putting in a break in some flower beds, so it will no longer be a circuit. It will have to slow people down, and I think it will have a slight knock-on effect onto the general problems on Fen Road as well. You start to sort of kill off the whole attitude of let's race around. So, I mean, as I've said a couple of times, we're going to be doing speed surveys. I guess you guys will be feeding back to us where you feel the hotspot areas are. It's very early days, let's see what the problems are and look at addressing it. We've got Operation Safe Passage, being moved up into, up towards the sort of Victoria Road area. So undoubtedly we will be addressing offending and road safety hand in hand.
police?
Nighttime enforcement and also more police numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've no idea.
No idea.
I've no idea.
And nighttime enforcement of the speed limit.
Nighttime enforcement of the speed limit. I guess if that's flagged up, and we are going to have to prioritise it. So as I say, it's quite a large body of new work for us. We're going to have to prioritise. I guess if the issue is late at night, I appreciate people saying, well, you know, somebody's racing down Northfields Avenue at 70 miles per hour, but then they're going to be the only car they're going to stand out. You know, we do stop. We're out in unmarked vehicles, in marked vehicles. Some of the unmarked vehicles have got, you know, blue lights in the grille. You'd be surprised how many people we actually catch out. I guess the main times would be when we've got the vulnerable road users, like the kids, you know, coming out of school on Arbury Road, Carlton Way, etc. And perhaps that's would suggest itself as a priority above, you know, one person driving at 70 miles per hour at 2 o'clock in the morning. As disturbing that might be.
It's not just one person. I was also thinking of Histon Road as well. That was a lot of speed at night.
Yeah.
Apologise.
A point that a colleague of mine who actually lived in Horsley Park, motorbikes at 20 minutes each, obviously, through to the north there on the way to work. And it's kind of related to the timescale in which you referred in your report, in its infancy, obviously, and whether there's a period of time in which you feel that people need to be accustomed to 20 miles per hour before you start reacting seriously to hotspots, persistent hotspots, if you like, flouting reduced speed limits. And whether that you were making the point, what was the timescale of the introduction and the fact, obviously, over a period of time as the signs and roundabouts went in, there'll be a certain amount of confusion of what's going on. So is there a period of time in which you can safely say, as you report hotspots and so forth, yes, we'll seriously look at this particular street, or particular area, and do some enforcement?
You make a very good point. It's what I alluded to about the changed environment.
Yeah.
You know, we often talk, you know, when we talked about issues with cyclists in the past, we talked about, you know, culture and changing the culture. So I guess when we sit down at the next North Area meeting, there will be better place to say, this is what we need to be doing, this is what we want the police to be doing. We'll know much more about it. But yeah, it's going to take a while for the 20 mile per hour thing to sink in. And at the moment, that's why we're looking more at education as opposed to enforcement.
Adding to the list of individual requests, Nuffield Road outside the school, because it has historically had a 20 mile hour limit, which is unenforceable because it was the only road in the area. So I've had a bunch of parents that I've got together, and I'll pass the details on to you outside this meeting. I'm just wondering, is there a sense in which this committee, within the larger priority, could set, there's already been 2 or 3 mentioned already, haven't they, set some sort of sub-priority to say we want these 3 looked at, and that can actually be taken on board officially. Because when we're talking about saying that we identified some of these areas as hotspots originally, otherwise we're just going to, it's just a bit of a, we want you to do it.
Yeah, very briefly, my concern is that we're asking just an assessment's priority the police to take on what is a massive new piece of work. It's an enormous piece of work, and to an extent I think we've got to give them the freedom to determine how to do that work to a certain extent, at least when it settles down. I think after that we might be able to come back and say, look, it's not working, this has been picked up. But I think for the moment, if we just flag up what are hotspots, so that the police can bear that in mind, I think reasonably that's all we can do. Secondly, as far as I'm aware, this meeting doesn't have any formal power to force the police to do any of this whatsoever. They come to this meeting voluntarily to set these priorities. So again, I would rather manage expectations on what the police can do.
I think what's more important is that we make sure that we know all suggestions.
Well, that's essentially what I'm asking for.
So we just make sure that we minute those, so that there's a list to Sergeant Barry's team.
I mean, what I'm essentially asking for is something that comes back to the next committee that says, make some comment on their suggestions as opposed to just generic. It may be that you decided that you couldn't prioritise those things. It may be that you find there are other priorities, but I think it's important that we hold the police to account in the sense of saying, we make this request. The other point I was just going to make is that you mentioned your current experiences of people are using supposed lack of signage. I think it would actually be quite useful if that training persists, that you could actually bring some examples back to this committee so that we can follow up whether those lacks of signage are real or not, and if get them changed if they are causing you a problem.
I think from my colleagues who went out, in some areas it's quite clear on the road surface, and other areas it's not. But in terms of these hotspot areas, for example, we've talked about the top end of Eastern Road. I know when we work with cycling campaigners, that's an area they particularly flagged up for where the road narrows. You've still got a cycle lane. It's almost impossible for a bus and a cycle to coexist on that bit of road. So there's all sorts of issues there, and it's almost akin to the Fen Road situation where no amount of policing is really going to address bad design. I know, we looked together at some of the heads of the roads, going to Milton Road, Gilbert Road, and Arbury Road, where bad design at the end of the road is pretty much causing the problem.
Councillor Ward and Andy Preston both indicated on this, so I'm going to let them come back to the signage.
Yeah, just to say, if the police come across issues with signage, don't wait for the next committee, just take it straight to Andy Preston.
Andy, did you hear that?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Yeah,
Just very quickly, because we were talking about some 20 mile an hour limits, the majority of them are zones, and there is a difference in terms of the repeater signage with the difference between a limit and a zone. In a zone, the repeater is basically now a piece of traffic calming. In a zone, you used to have an engineered traffic calming feature. Now, a repeater is regarded as a traffic calming feature. There is a mix of repeater signs, the old round on a lamp column or adjacent piece of street furniture, and round on the road. There is a mixture of the two. We didn't want to splash rounds on the road all over the north area of the city for obvious reasons. There is also a cost. The round on an existing lamp column is £26 installed. A round in the road affects the flow of vehicles, what it's installed, etc., etc. Is a significant increase in cost. But there is a mix of the two. But in terms, as I mentioned widely, we will be reviewing the signage, any suggestions about changes, but there obviously is Department for Transport guidance, and there is a restriction on where the signage can be. It has in terms of spacing, etc. So we do have to still stick within that guidance. But most welcome suggestions of any issue sites. We will certainly review that from councillors, from members of the public. Happy to take any issues.
Yes, we are learning today about the bats, nesting habits, and the obscure byways of the English speed law and traffic zones. Fascinating. Damien.
Yes, Gilbert Road keeps on coming up as a hotspot with very, very fast driving, and the same thing on Gilbert Road is cycling on the pavement. It comes up all the time. I realise it's difficult to do anything about it.
I mean, Gilbert Road has been in the news for these sort of problems for a while now. When the cycle lanes are put in, a lot of residents complain about cycle lanes. You've got the confusion at the heads of the road, and obviously you've got the busy school with the kids coming out, where it's not impossible to enforce with some of the kids. Do you want them on the road with their cycles? And yeah, it's a big open road, unfortunately, and it's a road that people do tend to speed down. The design of the road, we could do all sorts of different enforcement for all these different problems. Would we actually address the nature of the road? I mean, I know Ian has obviously looked at that. I don't know if anyone else has got any suggestions for, what we could do with Gilbert Road. It does seem to be a dreadful road for all these various, unsafe problems.
Yes, I'm also getting complaints about a certain number of motorcycles and scooters which don't seem to have silencers and create very, very high levels of noise. Are you able to insist on the bikes?
Yeah, but there is a legal restriction on the noise. That's why they have silencers in the first instance. I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert on that, but obviously my colleagues in traffic who regularly, the road policing unit who are regularly in Cambridge, you've heard me down Fen Road every day. I'm sure if they witnessed or heard anything like that, they'd undoubtedly address it. We do an awful lot of, while we drive around doing other things, we're stopping vehicles all the time. So it's not like we're allowing people just to drive past flouting the speed limits, the noise limits, whatever it is. If we've got an opportunity to stop somebody, we do. And I mean, I spend a lot of time in an unmarked car, and I can promise you, we catch an awful lot of people where we'll obviously it's got to be safe, but we'll dismount at a traffic light in order to pull a car over and address the offences we've just witnessed. And we have a great deal of success in addressing offenders that way.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things, three things. One, to answer Councillor Manning's query about Lovehill Road. It would be good if County were to act with the enforcement officer. I watched them come at 10 to 3 one afternoon, and he left at 5 to 3 before the school even came out and the parents were there. So if the enforcement officer was there to give the tickets out and slow down these cars and stop them parking on pavements, we wouldn't have this problem. Jason,
application which enforcement officer?
Parking enforcement.
Parking enforcement.
Yes,
right.
yeah. Because a lot of parents have said to me, and I've said the same. Jason, the other thing is, on the other crimes, there's 220. How many of them were domestic violence? Do you have figures, or?
I would imagine domestic violence would become under violent crime pretty much. So
Yeah.
if you've got a common assault or an ABH, that would go under violent crime.
Right, okay. And the last thing is the fly tipping that seems to have gone up. Do you know what the reason is or anything?
Whereabouts?
In the whole north area, 93 incidents, fly tipping?
Fly tipping is something that the council deal with as opposed to, I mean obviously where we encounter it, we address it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's pretty much a council job. I can't offer any explanation. I mean, as far as I'm aware, metal thefts, which were causing a great deal of fly tipping, appear to have gone down slightly, from previous last year, for example. Occasionally we get illegal travel sites, these spontaneous travel sites setting up, which do tend to bring a bit of fly tipping with them. But no, I mean, I can't think of any real reason for why that would be happening.
Okay, thanks.
On the fly tipping and breakdown, it looks to me like across the whole area, it's actually fallen according to the detailed data. So you've fallen from the same period last year, which is welcome, but obviously still a long way to go. I'll go back what's on my list. I've now lost my list of the data. Right, found it. Councillor Beard.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say I largely agree with the proposed priorities. I've just got a couple of questions. First on the drugs. I have in a previous North Area Committee asked whether we could split out another column to record drugs-related offences. A couple of reasons behind this. Being a priority, you want to check or follow the progress, holistically to see whether it's going up, down, and one year to the next. Also, it gives some visibility to the level of the crimes nationally, because one of the comments you made was the fact that we are getting a number of individuals travelling from different districts, from London particularly, to do their activities in this area. And it occurred to me that it actually needs some national action and some national cooperation to deal with this particular issue. So I wonder if you could come back on whether there's any possibility of that. And then, just to make sure we don't have any roads left out, we have had a death on King's Hedges Road caused by speeding that I just want to mention, and this falls into the category of the obscene speeding motorists, as opposed to those people that are just faster than the new 20 miles an hour and yet to be educated. I believe Arbury Road has also had an injury or a death as the side of St Luke's School. I wonder whether there's any traffic officer support that you could ask from the county to take on the burden of some of the traffic work. There might be specialists in this area already, rather than having to learn this new, all the new policing methods. I mean, traffic enforcement is an art in itself. So I was wondering whether there's an opportunity for cooperation on that front. And finally, can I have a cardboard cutout of Mr. To keep my skateboard company? Thanks very much. Thanks for the hard work.
You might have to remind me what some of those questions were. In terms of cooperating, yes, of course, we cooperate on a daily basis. I mean, like I say, we've Ian and his intelligent speed humps, straight away I was able to. But it was one of my ex-officers, actually, James Thorne, who he passed a few mathematical exams last year and went into accident investigation. So he's currently looking at that. The road policing unit have been down, I'll say, on Fen Road, supporting some Fen Road, but what you've got to bear in mind is they're extremely busy, and all the problems on the A14, the A10, etc. If you get a fatal accident, then they're done. That's done for the day. In terms of enforcement, we're not learning how to enforce it, and we all have, we've all got knowledge of how to enforce it. And I think what we need to do is explore the best places to be, how we're going to go about doing it, when we're doing it in an educational way, when we're doing, how. So it's just a case of sort of suck it and see it at the moment, as opposed to, we need to learn a way of enforcing traffic. Drugs data, I remember, I don't see why we can't put drugs data on there. We can bring it up at the NAG, And I get you asked a couple of questions in relation to that. It's very difficult to say what is drug related, because I would imagine that a huge amount of shoplifting is drug related crime because it's being used to pay for the crime. I imagine a lot of burglary is also drug related. A certain amount of violence will be drug related. Domestic violence is probably going to be drug related in some way on a lot of occasions as well. So it's quite difficult to quantify that. I think the fact that, in the last, few months we've been able to arrest 13 individuals, who are supplying Class A drugs, and we could have got more, but the time and effort that go into processing those individuals, a couple of those individuals, when they decided they don't want to give up the drugs, and we have to have them under constant observation, 2 police officers watching them, running backwards and forwards to the court, getting further warrants of detention, etc. So it's incredibly intensive in terms of work that we have to put into it. But I assure you, we could have got more than that. And I think that itself tells the tale. And the fact that we're now getting groups as opposed to individuals. We've had some other violence as well, which is drug related. With a couple of drug addicts being threatened, being intimidated into their boxes being used, being forced into running the drugs. So there's a lot of issues around that, and it's very much a live topic at the moment. In terms of national cooperation, yes, we do cooperate nationally. Obviously at the moment we're collaborating, that never sounds like a good word, collaboration. Closer for a certain generation, but anyway, we're collaborating with Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, so we're working quite closely with them, with our intelligence units, etc. And again, that's in the early stages. We talked to the Metropolitan Police, and we've Liverpool in a recent case. So they'll send us photographs. We'll try to do background checks. Again, I suppose it just depends how big a priority it is, and I guess if a crime is being committed on you, then perhaps you're not going to throw the resources at it that we here in Cambridgeshire would like and nip it in the bud. Having said that, a lot of these people have markers on them on PNC, so contact the sort of gangs unit or whoever, and so it is being worked on. We can put markers on vehicles, for example, and our automatic number plate recognition systems. I mean, London's full of those, which are speed cameras. We've got them up here, we've got them mounted in vehicles as well. We regularly, Big Fen Road is a place where we've often had NPR cars sitting up, the whole Chesterton area, sort of picking people up. So there's a lot we do in cooperation. It might not always be obvious. Was that one question?
Yeah. Did you want to comment on this?
Yeah.
Then we can answer myself.
Yeah, just very quickly, as already mentioned about Army Road, and I think it was possibly 2 summers ago that a motorcycle was killed at the junction with St Albans Road.
That was Road.
Yeah, and I mean, he was asking about the aiding, obviously the police, but also with the county council, which we have been doing quite closely with Mike Davis and the cycling team in terms of a strategic route which would address a lot of those issues on Arby Road. There's a range of quite high risk, I think, junctions and build out along a section of Arby Road from King's Hitchin Road Junction to Mere Way. So we would hope to address a lot of those issues, including the points that Councillor really brought up.
It is certainly a road that everyone is aware that something needs to be done on Councillor Nice.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in full agreement, as it appears most are, with the priorities that we've been talking about. But I do just want to spend a moment or two looking and going through the crime figures for King's Hedges, Jason, where total crime is up by 44 in a year. Other crime has over doubled, and it's actually times 7 in a year. I know these are relatively small figures. Other burglaries doubled, robbery doubled, and cycle theft up by a third. So that's essentially the bad news, in that certain areas of crime are rising quite considerably in King's Hedges. Not necessarily over the whole year. Some of those figures are from October to December last year, where they've risen quite considerably. Violent crime, however, seems to be sort of steady, stuck around the 42, 43 and 41 mark. It's not seeming to get any less, and it's not seeming to get any more. On a sort of slightly more positive note, it would appear that criminal damage is down, theft from shops and vehicles are down, and sort of total level of antisocial behaviour is down in that same period. But my concern is that does setting other issues as main priorities take away from day-to-day workings, if you like, in areas, and I'm speaking as a King's Hedges ward councillor, so specifically about King's Hedges, which seems to have, sort of, I think, pretty much the highest rise. Now, I'm not aware yet whether we've got, we did have 2 PCSOs, and I think it went down to 1. I'm not sure if that's gone back up, and if it hasn't, is there a possibility that would have had an effect in as much as not as much work being done in King's Hedges, so these sort of general day-to-day crimes, that sounds awful, doesn't it, day-to-day crime, but that are rising.
Yeah, I mean, your crime level has gone up, and what I would say is that there's a lot of these drug offences that people are catching are, you've got a lot of flats, single-bedroom flats in King's Hedges, and a lot of the drug dealers are operating out of these flats. Cannabis cultivation, had quite a lot of that in King's Hedges as well. It's good that obviously the theft from the cars and shops has gone down. Does that indicate that we're perhaps we're being successful with the drug side of things, and it's reducing that? The burglaries, I know we had a spate because just after Christmas they let out of prison quite a few recidivist burglars. Most of them are now back inside, but you get one individual going on a spate, and that skews all the figures, completely. Just looking, robberies, we had an increase in robberies in general, but we've locked 2 people up for those robberies, and since then we've only had 1 robbery. and that was about 2 months ago. So you get, with the quantities that we're actually looking at, an individual can make a huge difference, as can the weather. A rainy summer, crime goes down, hot summer, crime goes up.
Yeah, no, look, I don't dispute much of that, and of course, it doesn't sound, I've got a whole range of figures sitting here looking at me, and so one thing's gone up, some things have gone down. Obviously pleased about the stuff that goes down, less happy about the stuff that goes up. And like you say, all the voters will be one person, and hopefully the next lot of figures, if they're now inside, will reflect the fact that they're no longer at work.
You have to wonder about some of them, whether they're having the right kind of work, given how they have a very short career and then go back again. Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your thanks earlier on. Jason, I just wanted to pick up on the third recommendation that you were suggesting. I support the first two. I just wondered if we could have some more details about what that would involve. You said about young people congregating, obviously going into the summer months. I think I know what you're getting at here, but it's just, given that young people congregating in itself isn't against the law.
No, we did it last year.
So some details.
Well, we just had high visibility patrols, in the parks. We had some close patrol work in the parks as well, just to see what was going on. It's not just for young people. I mean, every now and again we get this kind of organised fight scenario which catches everybody's attention. It very rarely happens, and I'm pretty sure that we all had it when we were in school that these sort of things go on. But I think we do keep a lid on that, and of course traditionally we've had problems with foreign students. Many of whom are hosted throughout the north of Cambridge, and they gather in the park, they're quite clearly foreign students, and they do tend to sometimes attract attention. And we in the past, historically, we've had a lot of robberies and attacks on foreign students, and I think we've looked at different ways of addressing this. And last year, it was a very good year for foreign students, and for no problems in the green areas. And my suggestion was that's because we did up our sort of patrol work in the parks.
Councillor Sanya. Oh, do you want to come back to that? Sorry.
Thank you. I mean, that makes sense. If the recommendation to be about open spaces rather than particularly young people, because you obviously mentioned that it's not just young people that you do.
No, I'm sorry I mentioned young people. It was just, I don't recall mentioning in that way, maybe I did, but it's just to sort of build up the groups where you're going to have either violence or problems.
I mean, just to sort of slightly contradict myself, the main point that I was trying to make, you are aware, I suppose, about Cats College opening in the old GE site in East Chesterton if you're not already. So there'll be lots of new students in East Chesterton, so that's just something to be aware of, I think.
The note I made when you introduced it was ASD on green spaces.
Yeah.
Talk about young people. But yeah. Councillor Sanya.
Thank you, Chair. Just to touch on quickly on what Kevin said, he did ask you about PCS hedges, and I didn't hear in your response whether we have one or two. If you only have one, I know you said an individual can make all the difference, so would there be a possibility of us having a second if you think that may assist in helping you to deal with the criminal aspects of the
Yeah, undoubtedly. On a national level, there's been no recruitment of PCSOs for a period of time. So as we've lost them through natural wastage, so for example, a number of them joined the police or moved to other jobs, we have been left slightly shorter than we have been over the last few years. We've got one at the moment in King's Hedge, down from 3 as it originally was because we had such a large site up at CRC. Obviously that PCSO is a very experienced PCSO, and he's taken it in his stride, but undoubtedly visible deterrent, I guess, is perhaps an issue. We cater for that. I know we've recruited lots of special constables to sort of make up for the shortfall there, and recruitment of PCSOs has started again. So I am expecting more PCSOs to join us soon. And on the sort of flip side of losing some PCSOs is when they, potentially, I know the position is being looked at nationally as whether they're going to maintain it or not. One of our contentious PCSOs, Louise Warbank, who was very good long serving, has moved into the City Ancestral Navy team, which in a way has made our joint working even closer and more cooperative and understanding the way we do our business. So there's a flip side to sort of losing some PCSOs as well into the police and also into other related departments.
Okay, Councillor Price is just reminding me if you declare an interest that he's signing a special constable. So we'll move quickly to Tim, who's just where's the microphone on? No microphone? Do you want to?
I'm shouting.
You'll shout, yeah.